The world of Space Marine 2 is absolutely packed with details, Easter eggs, and references to the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Being a huge Warhammer fan myself, I wanted to compile a few interesting details and secrets that I've found so far. This is by no means everything the game is hiding away, so if you have any fascinating finds, secrets, or cool details that you've found, be sure to leave them in the comment section below, and maybe we'll do a follow-up video. I've done my best to avoid major spoilers, but consider yourself warned if you do want to go into Space Marine 2 completely fresh. Now without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing I noticed is that the sword wielded by our Deathwatch Black Shield Titus is actually his chainsword from the original game. You can see them side by side here, but at the very least it's either the same model, unlikely as how unique it is, or some of his gear was kept stored away while he was in stasis. When returning to the battle barge later in the game, you can actually see the chainsword mounted in his quarters, and you can see that it is a little smaller than the other chainswords throughout the game, the new ones being more suited for the stature of a Primaris. While we're in Titus's room, we can also find his Deathwatch Pauldron. Every Space Marine wears one of these pauldrons on their left arm while serving with the Deathwatch, with the pauldron bearing their chapter icon moved onto their right arm. It's common that when a Space Marine finishes their service with the Deathwatch and returns to their chapter, they keep the Deathwatch Pauldron, but will now wear it on their right arm instead. They continue to wear this pauldron as a mark of honour and Xenos fighting experience. However, Titus hangs his pauldron and Blackwatch robes in his chambers. I believe this is because while he is rightfully proud of his time with the Deathwatch, it also pains him to recall the situation that led to his time with them, and sees his return to the Ultramarines as a new, defined period in his service to the Emperor. So instead, Titus wears a more muted chain with the symbol of the Inquisition to mark his time with the Deathwatch instead. We saw the purple eyes of the Cadians in the original announcement trailer for Space Marine 2, a side effect that those hailing from Cadia have due to their close proximity to the Eye of Terror. Using Space Marine 2's photo mode, you can actually see each individual model of Astra Militarum also have these purple eyes. A small detail, sure, but it makes the Cadian forces feel that bit more special. You may have noticed that Astra Militarum armoured vehicles and tanks feature vertical red and white lines painted towards their front. This, as well as a lot of their design in general, is inspired by British World War I tanks, as they use these markings to aid recognition after the Germans began using captured British vehicles. In older Imperial Guard codexes, it's explained that these are now used more as company markings, but you could also argue that there's always the risk of orcs or traitors using captured tanks too, so this bit of paint could continue to distinguish friend from foe even in the far future. One smaller detail is that you can also see these marks on the edge of the armour. These flame cut marks appear on World War II tanks too, where thick armoured panels have been cut down to fit each tank. Have you noticed the bolt round hanging from Chairon's pauldron? Well, this is actually an award called the Marksman's Honour. The golden case of the bolt shell is also said to be one of the spent bolt cases from the weapon of the Ultramarines Primarch, Robute Guilliman. These are only awarded to Space Marines that have shown exceptional accuracy with ranged weapons, or have performed an incredible feat of marksmanship. Interestingly though, Chairon's default weapon is the auto bolt rifle, which isn't equipped with a scope, so I guess this guy is such a hotshot, he doesn't need an optic. It's easy to miss as you're swinging your weapon through hordes of Tyranids, but you can actually see the exhaust fumes spewing from the engine inside your chainsword. Some 40k chainswords use power packs or batteries, while others use promethium, basically 40k gasoline. So if the Space Marine 2 variant is a variant using a power pack, this could be a heat exhaust instead, as we see a similar effect on the Astartes power packs, which are themselves powered by a miniature fusion reactor. The Tyranid Termagants in Space Marine 2 are equipped with a living biological weapon called a flesh borer. The weapon actually houses a brood nest where borer beetles lay their eggs which once hatched are used as the weapon's ammunition. Yes, this thing is shooting frenzied, biting beetles at you. And if that wasn't horrifying enough, you can actually see that this living weapon has its own eye, visible on the horrific device. People were requesting the ability to wear your helmet in the Space Marine 2 campaign from the moment the game was announced. But if you threw your helmet on the moment your campaign started, you may not have noticed that each character's voice is accurately modulated as if they were speaking through the helmet's vox.
What is our assignment?
The Cadians have lost control of the orbital guns. We are to recapture them.
You may not have noticed, but if you hold up on your D-pad, you can issue pings and commands, but you can also use this menu to trigger voice lines.
The Codex is a guide, not a commandment.
Speaking of the Codex, there is a nice reference to the original 2011 Space Marine as Gadriel comments on their squad's plan to launch from their ship with a jump pack.
The Codex Astartes does not support this action, but I am looking forward to it.
The Codex Astartes does not support this action.
Try to keep up.
Slaying Xenos and heretics can be messy work, especially with a weapon like the Chainsword. But did you know that if you take a quick tumble in a nearby body of water, be that from a city fountain or swamp, you can wash away that filth until your armor is once again as clean as the day it came from the forges? Another detail that's easy to miss if you're not experimenting with the photo mode is that while aiming a weapon, Titus will actually shut one of his eyes, as if looking down the scope or through the iron sights. With a Space Marine suite of sensors, targeting devices, and heightened senses, this may not strictly be necessary, but it's nice to see Titus is taking his marksmanship seriously. One of the most common symbols you'll see in any Warhammer 40,000 game is the Aquila, and Space Marine 2 is no different, as the Imperium's twin-headed eagle can be found everywhere, with different versions and levels of detail. Almost everything that is owned or produced by the Imperium of Man has this sacred symbol somewhere. More detailed versions have the left eagle depicted with eyes while the right is blindfolded, as you can see in the 3D versions found on the Battle Barge command bridge. Originally, the blind side represented mankind looking back into its past, moving on from the mistakes of mankind's history, while the sighted side looked towards the future and a better life for humanity. But did you know that it's possible to make the sign of the Aquila with your hands? It's very easy to miss, but you can actually see a few Astra Militarum troopers performing this gesture. This gesture is known to every single individual within the borders of the Imperium, and is often used to show your allegiance or as a sign of devotion or respect. To many, the soldiers of the Astra Militarum are often considered cannon fodder, but every soul able to fight for the Emperor is one worth saving. In this scene, you can see an Imperial Guardsman running for cover as a Tyranid warrior takes aim and shoots them. But if you're quick enough, you can actually save this soldier's life by stunning the Tyranid before they get their shot off, or stepping in front of the shot yourself. The Tyranid warrior is really locked onto this guy, so you may have to block more than one shot. This isn't the only place you can save a few Militarum souls though. You can also lend some supporting fire to fights off in the far distance, helping thin the waves of Tyranids assaulting Cadian positions so they may fight another day. In the mission Servant of the Machine, as you approach the Temple of Tzeentch, you can see armoured busts adorning the arena. This armour is actually a very old variant of Space Marine power armour called the Mark III Iron Armour from the years of the Great Crusade, which took place across the 30th and 31st millennium prior to the Horus Heresy, a time where Space Marine legions more or less got along with each other. This detail also complements the paintings that adorn the walls of the Temple of Tzeentch, as you can see pieces of art that seem to be depicting more Space Marines battling to conquer and unify the galaxy during the Great Crusade. This art really stood out to me as it's very reminiscent of the art found on many of the covers from the Horus Heresy series. In fact, the composition of this image really reminded me of this piece of artwork titled Abacol by Sam Wood, featured in the Visions of Heresy book. One thing I've been able to decipher is some of the numerical scribblings of the Adeptus Mechanicus. There are hundreds of pieces of machinery scattered through Space Marine 2, and some of them have inscriptions marked upon their hulls. I translated this one that I found on a giant drill. It reads, "Each one a sacred shrine," which is apt when you consider that the AdMech hold machinery and technology in such high regard. However, as far as I could tell, a few of these other ones are just gibberish, but some other codebreakers among you may fare better. With that in mind, I also found these screens throughout the same level. I haven't been able to work out if they say anything, but I'm convinced that they must. If you manage to decipher them though, leave them in the comments and we can share that knowledge together in a future video. There is magic in the air. When fighting the Thousand Suns or battling your way through their warp-touched environments, you may have seen purple particles around the map or following your character. You can actually use photo mode to see these properly, but these particles are actually runes, and part of a chaos language called the Dark Tongue. This language originated in Warhammer Fantasy, and first appeared as early as the 90s. You can see a specifically Tzeentch variant of the runes in the Age of Sigmar battle tome, Disciples of Tzeentch. I've not been able to decipher if a message is hidden here though, so if there are any warp-touched Tzeentch worshippers among you that can read these runes, please do leave the solution in the comments below. Potential minor spoiler for this one, but this scene features a really cool detail. If you have played the campaign, then you know that these Astra Militarum troopers are actually heretical traitors aligned with the Thousand Sons. But if you look closely, the trooper who is addressing the squad of Ultramarines doesn't have the Cadian purple eyes, which every other member of the Cadian 8th Regiment has. This is a really small detail, and you only get a couple of seconds to appreciate it. But it is extremely cool to see this attention to detail going into the world building of Space Marine 2. And because of this, I don't believe that these traitors were ever members of the Imperial Guard. It's more likely they stole these uniforms or killed their previous owners to disguise themselves as loyal soldiers. In the aftermath of a later scene, we also learn that Chairon is old as hell. In fact, he may have been born over 10,000 years ago. Let me explain. Chairon remarks that,
How did you know? I was a boy on Calf when the word bearers attacked. I came to know the mark of chaos.
this is a reference to the Battle of Calth, which took place in the 31st millennium during the beginning of the Horus Heresy. Horus's treachery was not yet known to the Ultramarines Primarch Roboute Guilliman, so when he was ordered by the War Master Horus to muster his legion on Calth, he did so without question, bringing 200,000 Space Marines and countless more war machines and auxiliaries to the planet. The word-bearers were then sent to Calth to exterminate the gathered Ultramarines. Though they failed and the majority of the traitors were destroyed, the Ultramarines lost more than half their number, and the planet of Calth was devastated to the point that the surface was uninhabitable, and life could only persist underground or within heavily shielded surface cities. So that's where Chairon is from, but this event happened 10 millennia ago. Well, Archmagos Belisarius Cawl began the great work of creating the Primaris Marines just after the Horus Heresy, using both existing Space Marines and young recruits to create the Primaris. These individuals were then kept in stasis for 10,000 years, and awoken just before the 42nd millennium. So the memory of seeing his homeworld devastated is still raw and fresh in his memory. The use of service studs to represent years served has fallen out of favour with many Astartes, so while we can deduce that Chairon is over 10,000 years old, it isn't totally clear how long he's been awake, so to speak. A reference and detail I didn't expect to see was a quote from Isidore Achios. Isidore Achios was a Bloodraven librarian that appeared in the original Dawn of War, released in 2004 by Relic, the developers of the original 2011 Space Marine game.
An open mind is like a fortress with its gates unbarred and unguarded.
It's a great quote, no doubt. But not only is Isidore Achios from a different studio's game, he's also from a different chapter. But most of all, the guy was a traitor. He was manipulated by a sorcerer and turned to chaos. I think the chaplain needs to have a few words with whoever is queuing up these motivational quotes. The captain of the Ultramarine 2nd Company, Savastas Akaran, as seen on the battle barge's bridge commanding the rest of the Ultramarines forces, is based on this, previously unnamed, model of a Primaris captain in Phobos armour. A lot of the detail present on this miniature has been translated onto the in-game Akaran, including his various honours, knife, pistol, and wonderful beard. But this question goes out to the developers of Space Marine 2. Did you give an Astartes by the name of Acharan a Scottish accent on purpose?
I'll be straight with you, Titus. I have my reservations about your reinstatement.
For those unaware, Ach is a Scottish exclamation. It can mean surprise, frustration, or even excitement and pleasure. But it's funny that this name and accent works so well. And when I tried to explain this to my Scottish grandfather, he replied, "Aye, okay, but what the hell is a Space Marine?" Anyway, those are 20 details in Space Marine 2 that I found interesting, and I hope you did too. If there are any secrets or details that you found, or lore tidbits from the game that you want to share, leave them in the comment section below, and maybe we'll feature them in a future episode. Since writing this, I have found even more secrets and details, so if you enjoyed this video and want to see another, make sure you click that like button, subscribe, and join us next time. Thank you for watching.